Hello and good evening to you all. First and foremost, I would like to say thank you to those of you who left feedback on my video from earlier. I just did less than a minute long video asking for people to leave questions, comments, or feedback so that I could come to you guys and talk about stuff. I mean, I can always talk about things that I think of, but for the most part, I like to address things that you guys want me to talk about because, there's a lot more of you than there are of me. And so that's my goal, is to discuss things that people actually want to know about. So I appreciate all of the feedback that I got earlier. And I did get a fair amount of questions. So I'm actually going to discuss a few of them under the umbrella topic of the days of Noah. What I'm actually going to start off with, though, is going through the questions that I received and kind of giving my intentions toward discussing some of these other things. Sorry, hair in my mouth. So Jesus Saves 726. Great question here. Thank you. Says, hope all is well. Yes, and I hope all is well with you too. I would like you to go over the 24 elders of Revelation. Are they the ones mentioned in Hebrews 11? Were they resurrected with Jesus? I also thought them to be the church, but I'm not sure. Thank you. What I think I'm actually going to do, because this conversation has come up a lot, and I have discussed it at length a few different times, but I think what I'm going to actually do is put like a PowerPoint presentation together, because the 24 comes from the Old Testament, but the Old Testament priesthood to which that pertained went away. The priesthood being changed, there is of necessity also a change of the law that comes from Hebrews 7. And so what you're seeing in the throne room is a priesthood, but it actually relates to the New Testament. And so what's the Old Testament, how it was originally established, what was the transition to the New Testament, and why do you see what you see in the throne room? That's 1 Peter 2's royal priesthood. You have made us unto our God kings and priests. Revelation talks about that in two different spots, in chapter 1 and chapter 5. And that's why you see 24 elders round about the throne wearing crowns. It is the redeemed royal priesthood from 1 Peter 2. So I think I'm actually going to put a slideshow together for that to make it maybe easier to discuss, and then I can just point people right to it rather than have to keep bringing it up, because I don't mind talking about it, but I think it might be easier to visually see. So thank you for that question, and I will put something together for that. Daniel says, and this is a really interesting topic, and we're going to go through part of this tonight. Could you talk about the giant / Nephilim of Genesis 6, and if they might return when the New Testament talks about Jesus returning during the times that will be as it was in the days of Noah? So we are going to go through that in part tonight. This to me is a fascinating conversation, a fascinating subject. And pretty much one of the only extra biblical studies that I ever paid any attention to was the study of giants, because to me it's just fascinating, like the ancient megalithic structures and the giants and all that stuff. It's absolutely fascinating to me. The Bible does talk about that as in the end times, in the last days. So what does it say? And we will go through that tonight. Dorothy Fan says, in response to one of my other comments talking about the days of Noah as kind of an overview, the 7 days that they were in the ark before God shut the door, as being kind of the same as a pre-trib rapture scenario. And that is actually, I think, where a lot of people, along with some of the wording in Matthew 24, link that to the rapture. It doesn't belong linked to the rapture. Enoch's story belongs linked to the rapture. The Noah kind of overlay or similitude or type and shadow belongs linked to Israel and the 7 years and God coming back to, or Jesus coming back to shut the door, like nobody else gets in at that point, which is what happened when God shut the door, as no one else got in the ark after that point. So we'll talk about that tonight too. Born Again for Christ said, how do we know that the fig tree is Israel? It seems to be generally accepted that Jesus is referring to Israel becoming a nation again in that parable. No, not directly. Maybe indirectly, but not directly. But continuing on, because we're going to discuss this tonight too. If so, that gives us a pretty good idea of the timing of future events. Jesus said everything would happen before one generation passed after this. With Israel being 73 now and Moses having defined a generation as 70 to 80 years, it seems there is a 7-year window left only, but I do not understand how we know that Jesus was talking about Israel in this parable. I'd love to hear your explanation or opinion on this. We're going to discuss, we're going to discuss that tonight as well, because really we're going to take this from Matthew 24 and then kind of go all the way back to the beginning. And then Tony asked about the rapture of the church, what it will look like. 1 Thessalonians 4 tells us the dead saints will be raptured first. Yes. Is there a lapse in between the dead and living saints being raptured? No, it is part of the same event, but I can discuss this in detail at another point. And further, he says, will the dead saints walk the earth, a la Matthew 27, 52, 53, before being caught up with us? So I will discuss it at a different point. But I will say, I come on here live and my cat freaks out, starts running around, making all kinds of noise. I will say thank you to those of you who left questions, comments, or things for discussion. I sincerely appreciate it. So I wanted to go over what was left and say thank you and kind of give an overview of what I will be going through in the future. And yeah, I really do kind of want to put a visual aid together for the topic of the 24 elders. I think that will be most helpful. But tonight, let's talk about the days of Noah. One of the biggest challenges to understanding this in context is the fact that people try to link it to the rapture of the church. And I would surmise that the majority of that is done because there is a lack of understanding of how, if it doesn't relate to the rapture, if it relates to the second coming, how people could possibly be eating, drinking, being married, given in marriage, and knew not when Jesus came and the flood, takes them all away. How could that possibly? Like, how could, at the very end of the 70th week, amidst all of the judgments and amidst all of the horror that's going on earth, how could people possibly be living business as usual? And I think because there is an attempt to really try to understand how that could be the case, that people say, well, it can't be the case. And so they just automatically say, well, it must be talking about the rapture, because we could just be business as usual. And then Jesus just comes and snatches us up, and then it's not business as usual anymore. Part of that also goes to the misunderstanding that people aren't going to know that it's supposed to take them by surprise. That they're just going along business as usual, and then, oops, Jesus decides to come back, and we surprises everybody. But when you take this in context and you look at the whole of Matthew 24, because that's really where it comes from, what is that chapter discussing? Matthew 24 and 25 is part of the Olivet Discourse. It corresponds directly to Mark 13. There is another Olivet Discourse given in Luke 21 that is different. These relate specifically to Daniel's prophecy in Daniel 9, the 70 weeks prophecy. Both Olivet Discourses do, but they relate to different parts of it. So this is what we need to first understand before we even have the discussion about the days of Noah. And I'll just give a very brief overview of this. But these specifically relate to Daniel's 70 weeks prophecy. 70 weeks are determined upon thy people, and upon thy holy city, to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street and the wall shall be built even in troublous times. I don't want to get it wrong, so I'm going to the book of Daniel. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Luke 21. Luke 21's Olivet Discourse is 70 AD specific. The very first few verses of it are actually 70th week specific. They correspond directly to the seal judgments. But then it says, but before all of that. And then it goes into talk about the events of 70 AD. So Luke 21, for the significant part of it, is related to Daniel's 70 weeks prophecy in Daniel 9:26. And the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, the end thereof shall be with a flood, and unto the end of the war desolations are determined. Because what does Luke 21 end with? Talking about the return of Jesus Christ. So it goes from 70 AD all the way up to the return of Jesus Christ. This is what will happen to the Jews. Conversely, Mark 13 and Matthew 24 are 70th week specific. They relate specifically to Daniel 9:27. He shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. In the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate, even unto the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. Revelation 6-19. When you look at the Olivet Discourses under the scope of applying them to Daniel's 70th week, Daniel's 70 weeks prophecy. When you look at Matthew 24 and Mark 13 and Luke 21, and you identify that they are specifically related to Daniel's 70 weeks prophecy, you can see the overlay. And then Revelation also helps you to interpret this. So knowing that Luke 21 talks specifically about the seal judgments, then it says, but before all of that, and then it goes into tie in what Jesus prophesied in Luke 21 about blindness being cast, and then knowing at the time of thy visitation, and that the temple would be laid low with the ground, and the people, all of that stuff, basically because they knew not the time of their visitation. So then that's all mirrored in Luke 21, where it talks about the events of 70 AD, and then what will occur regarding Israel all the way up to the timing of the second coming. Again, that is Daniel 9:26 specific. And then you go to the other Olivet Discourses in Matthew and Mark, and you see that they are actually 70th week specific, starting with the seal judgments, and then moving to the preaching of the everlasting gospel and the abomination of desolation. And then moving to the events of Revelation 13 with the false Christ and false prophets shall arise, deceive many, in so much as if it were possible they should deceive the very elect. After the tribulation of those days, the sun shall be dark and the moon shall not give her light, etc., etc. So you're basically from start to middle to end of the 70th week in Matthew 24, corresponding directly to the book of Revelation. And corresponding directly to Daniel 9:27, A, B, and C. He shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. Yep, go to Revelation 6:2. It's the bow you're first introduced to in the book of Genesis, which we will. Sorry, I know I have a hair. I can feel it when I'm talking, and I can feel it. I can't find it. We'll talk about this when we go to the book of Genesis in just a little bit to see kind of where this all started and relating the events of the days of Noah to the original story in Genesis to see kind of that similitude or that type and shadow. how it relates. So when you go into the study of Matthew 24, understanding that it relates directly to the part of the 70 weeks prophecy, there is little way to misconstrue what this is actually talking about. And it has nothing to do with the rapture of the church. It has to do with the events of that 7-year period. Now, after Jesus talks about the seal judgments, take heed that no man deceive you, for many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. Seal 1, you shall hear of wars, rumors of wars, so that you not be troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. Seal 2, there shall be famine. Seal 3, and pestilences. Seal 4, and earthquakes in diverse places. Seal 6. What does he say? All these are the beginning of sorrows, just like in Revelation 6. The rich men, the poor men, the free men, the bondmen hid themselves in the dens and the rocks and mountains, said to the mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of his wrath is come. And who shall be able to stand? All these are the beginning of sorrows. So you can see direct correlation from those few verses to Revelation 6. You move further through Matthew 24, and you see in this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached as a witness to all nations, and then the end shall come. In the days of the voice of the seventh angel, when he shall begin to sound, the mystery of God shall be finished, revealed, as he hath declared to his servants the prophets. What is that? I saw another angel fly through the midst of the heaven, having the everlasting gospel, to preach unto them that dwell on the earth, and to every nation and people and kindred and tongue, crying with a loud voice, saying, fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come, and worship him that made heaven, the earth, the sea, and the fountains of waters. Again, that's Revelation 14, 6 and 7. Revelation 10, 7. Matthew 24, 14. This gospel of the kingdom shall be preached as a witness to all nations, and then the end shall come. Followed by what Daniel 9:27b tells us, in the midst of the week, you shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate. When ye shall therefore see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place. Then you go Matthew 24, 15 through 22. It details the events of the flight of the remnant, which correspond to Revelation 12, 6 and Revelation 12, 14. The flight's discussed in two places, where they're taken on the wings of a great eagle into her place where she is nourished for a time times half a time from the face of the serpent. Puts it at the midpoint of the week. And then you go into the events of Revelation 13 again with the false Christ, false prophets, arising and deceiving many, insomuch that if it were possible, they should deceive the very elect. That won't be possible, because where will the very elect be? Preserved and protected in the wilderness by God for a time times half time. So they won't be able to be gotten to be deceived in that manner. And then you keep reading and you get to the second coming, which is Daniel 9:27c, until the end is in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice, the oblation to cease, for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, even unto the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. Well, that's Revelation 19, right? It's also immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun shall be dark and the moon shall not give her light, the stars shall fall from heaven, the powers of the heaven shall be shaken. Then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man, and all the tribes of the earth shall mourn. They shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. So clearly, when you understand that these Olivet discourses are basically 70 weeks specific, Daniel's 70-week prophecy specific, you tie Luke's to Daniel 9:26, and you tie Matthew and Mark's to Daniel 9:27. When you understand that it is 70th week specific, and you can absolutely mirror that from Daniel 9:27 to Revelation 6 through 19, you have a beginning and a middle and an end. You can clearly tell that when Jesus then goes in to describe these times in I want to say parabolic fashion, but in parable fashion, he's basically teaching spiritual truths about how at the time when he comes back, there's going to be two different people on earth, those who are saved and those who are not saved. Now, he's linking in one of those passages of teaching this truth, that there will be people who are ready and saved to meet him, and those who are not ready and not saved and will not be spared that judgment. He's clearly referencing in the days of Noah. Well, that's something that the Jews would have known. I mean, that's in the Torah. It's in Genesis all the way back in the beginning. So they're going to understand that. So what does he say? But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Okay, well, what's the coming of the Son of Man? The second coming. Okay, so we already know that this whole chapter it's overlaying Daniel 9:27, 70th week specific. Well, what's the only coming of the Son of Man mentioned in Daniel 9:27? The end, until the consummation that be poured upon the desolate. Who pours the judgment upon the desolator at the end of the 70th week? Jesus, the Son of Man, right? So what coming is this talking about? When you take this in comparison with Daniel 9:27, what coming is being talked about? When is the Son of Man coming back to judge the world? At the second coming. So as in the days of Noah were, so also shall the coming of the Son of Man be. Okay, let's go back to Genesis and let's take a look at what the days of Noah were. Let's read this story. I'm not going back far enough. It's all the way at the beginning. Okay. So we have, I'm honestly just going to keep reading until I get to a point where maybe I want to stop to explain this time period. And we'll also get into one of the other questions I was asked about the giants and the Nephilim in the days of Noah. As it came to pass, this is Genesis 6:1. And it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men that were fair, and they took them wives of all they chose. The Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same were mighty men, became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. This, I'm gonna segue from this for just a second and introduce the concept that I was also asked about, talking about the days of Noah and the giants and things like that. Okay. What is that word? Mighty men. Why did I draw a blank? Why did I draw a blank? Genesis 6, Hebrew word. Genesis 6:4. Been a while since I discussed this, so. Maybe that's, oh, Gibor. That's what it was. Gibborim. So when you look at that word in context in the end times and the chapters that discuss the end times, it actually tells you that the giants are going to be involved in specifically the destruction of Babylon. It's interesting. I don't mean to jump around, but I might as things come into my mind so that I don't forget to say them. When I started this video, I was talking about the concept of eating, drinking, marrying, being given in marriage. How could things be business as usual if this does not relate to the rapture? How, and it relates to the second coming, which it does. How could people possibly be living business as usual? How could they possibly be eating, drinking, marrying, being given in marriage, living like they have no reason to suspect that things won't just keep continuing, like that there's not an end point, that the earth isn't completely destroyed by all of the judgments. Like, how could they just be living business as usual? What's the very last thing that occurs before Jesus comes back in the book of Revelation? The destruction of Babylon. What are we told is occurring in Babylon all the way up to the point where she's destroyed? And really, you're not told that it's happening. You're told that once the city is destroyed, those things will no longer be happening. So the inference is that they were up to the point the city is destroyed. A mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and cast it into the sea, saying, "Thus with violence shall that great city be thrown down, and shall no more be found at all. The voice of harpers and musicians, and of pipers and trumpeters shall be heard no more in thee, and no craftsman of whatsoever craft he be shall be found any more in thee. The sound of a millstone shall be heard no more at all in thee. The light of a candle shall no more at all in thee, shall shine no more all in thee. The voice of the bridegroom and of the bride, marrying, being given in marriage, all the way up to the end. Thy merchants were the great men of the earth, for by thy sorceries all nations were deceived, and in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and of all that were slain upon the earth." And that is the avenging of the blood. No, not Rome, Babylon. So the question about how those things could be happening all the way up to the second coming pertaining to Matthew. It is a question. I understand that it is a question. And it doesn't really, at the end of the day, matter if we can understand how those things could be happening. Clearly they will be. And we learn that from Revelation 18, where it discusses what will no longer be occurring in Babylon once that city is destroyed. Meaning that all of those things were happening up to the point the city was destroyed. Craft, merchants, marrying, being given in marriage, music, all of those things. People were working and living their lives and conducting daily business up to the time that the city was destroyed or will be destroyed. And the city will be destroyed very, very last course of business before Jesus comes back in the second coming. This is the tie to Matthew 24. As the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Second coming. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark. Yep. And knew not until the flood came and took them all away. So also shall the coming of the Son of Man be. No doesn't mean to be caught by surprise. Like timing wise, it doesn't mean that they're not going to know the timing of it. Clearly, there is a day count associated to this. And once seal 1 is opened, that time clock starts. In 2,520 days later, Jesus is coming back. More to the point, in Revelation 16, the sixth vial being poured out gathers the kings of the earth to the battle of the great day of God Almighty. This timing, like on a time clock, days, minutes, seconds, hours, the date, is not going to be a surprise. People are going to know. Whether or not they believe that he's coming back, whether or not they internally, logically understand cognitively that he's coming back is a different story. We know that they're going to not really understand that in a, oh, I better get right kind of way because this day is coming and it's going to happen. From 2 Peter 3. For this they willingly are ignorant of that by the word of God the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water, whereby the earth that was then being overflowed with water perished. But the heavens and the earth, which are now by the same word, are kept in store, reserved unto fire against the day of judgment and perdition of ungodly men. For this they are willingly ignorant. When you go back to the days of Noah, where this comes from, For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating, drinking, marrying, given in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark, and knew not until the flood came and took them all away. Did they know that the flood was coming? Yeah. Noah spent 500 years warning them and building a big old boat in front of them. Do not think for a second that they did not know this was coming. For this, they are willfully ignorant. They had all the head knowledge in the world. What they did not possess was heart knowledge. This isn't talking about that day coming to take them by surprise. It's not going to do that. Again, there's a time clock attached to it, and there's a vile judgment that's specifically related to gathering people together to do battle against Jesus when he comes back. It's not a head knowledge, a lack of head knowledge type thing. This is a lack of heart knowledge type thing. Willingly ignorant. So you go back to the days of Noah. Oh, the giants. Okay, so I answered one question about the Babylon connection and people conducting business as usual. How could that be? Okay. The next thing, talking about the Gibor, the Nephilim, the giants, the recurrence of the giants. They're coming back. Yes, we learned this in Isaiah 13. So this also relates to Revelation 17 and 18 about the destruction of Babylon. Because who is destroying Babylon? The Antichrist army. The 10 kings give their power to the beast for 1 hour. That 1 hour is the hour in which Babylon is destroyed. So essentially, the beast and the 10 kings hate her so much they burn her with fire. But why do they do this? Because per Revelation 17, the Lord hath put it in their heart to do so. This army of the beast and the 10 kings that burns Babylon with fire, who are they? Well, let's go back to Isaiah to learn about the burden of Babylon. The burden of Babylon, which Isaiah the son of Amos did see, lift up a banner upon the high mountain, exalt the voice unto them, shake the hand, that they may go into the gates of the nobles. I have commanded my sanctified ones. Yep, because the Lord hath put it in their heart to do so, to burn her with fire. So the beast and the 10 kings and the army of them that destroy Babylon are doing this at the Lord's command. Not really understanding that that's why they're doing it, but that's why they're doing it, because the Lord hath put in their heart to do so. So this army that the Lord is assembling to accomplish his purpose, who is it composed of? I have commanded my sanctified ones. I have called my mighty ones. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bare children unto them, the same were become mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. When you go to the Septuagint and look at these verses in there, you will clearly see that mighty men is a reference to giants. The army that will be destroying Babylon at the command of the Lord, which will be under the command of the Antichrist and the 10 kings, is an army of giants. The noise of the multitude, I have commanded my sanctified ones. I have also called my mighty ones for mine anger, even them that rejoice in my highness. The noise of a multitude in the mountains, like the tumult of a great people, a tumultuous noise of the kingdoms of nations gathered together. Why? The Lord of the host mustereth the host of the battle, because he hath put it in their heart to do so. They come from a far country, even the end of heaven, the Lord, as weapons of his indignation to destroy the whole land. Howl ye, for the day of the Lord is at hand. It shall come as a destruction from the Almighty. Therefore shall all hands be faint, and every man's heart shall melt. They shall be afraid, pangs and sorrow shall take hold of them. They shall be in pain as a woman that travaileth. They shall be amazed one at another. Their faces shall be as flames. Behold, the day of the Lord cometh, cruel both with wrath and fierce anger, to lay the land desolate. He shall destroy the sinners thereof out of it. This is actually related to the book of Joel also, specifically right here in chapters 2 and 3 also talk about this. The stars of heaven and the constellations thereof shall not give their light. The sun shall be darkened and is going forth. The moon shall not cause her light to shine. This is also Matthew 24. After the tribulation of those days, the sun shall be darkened, the moon shall not give her light, the stars shall fall from heaven, the powers of heaven shall be shaken. And I will punish the world for their evil and the wicked for their iniquity, and I will cause the arrogancy of the proud to cease and will lay low the haughtiness of the terrible. Yep, because that is the last course of business. The burden of Babylon is the last order of business before Jesus comes back at the second coming. So those are inextricably intertwined. Again, you go back to the book of Joel. This also, actually, we'll do that right now because why not? Joel 2, yep. This army that destroys Babylon, that then comes to Israel to gather to do battle against Jesus. What are they composed of? Blow ye the trumpet in Zion. This is Joel 2:1. Sound an alarm in my holy mountain. Let the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of the Lord cometh, for it is nigh at hand. A day of darkness and of gloominess, a day of clouds and thick darkness, as the morning spread upon the mountains, a great people and a strong. There hath not been ever the like, neither shall there be any more after it, even to the years of many generations. A fire devoureth before them. This is the locust army. The locust army that is released in trumpet judgments 5 and 6, specifically 6. It's related to the locusts, though, which is trumpet judgment 5. So you have the combination of the locusts and this army, the supernatural army that comes out of the bottomless pit in trumpets 5 and 6, which is Revelation 9. This is Joel 1's locust army, destroying the land of Israel. You have a fire that basically comes before and behind to completely destroy the land. 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and thy holy city. The land of Israel and the people of Israel, that is what is being judged. The locust army is judging the land of Israel. Again, Joel 1, you read all about that. And in Joel 2, you see that is this locust army that is essentially coming to Jerusalem against thy people and thy holy city. Again, these are 70 weeks specific. These all go back to Daniel's prophecy about the end times. A fire devoureth before them, and behind them a flame burneth. The land is as the Garden of Eden before them, and behind them a desolate wilderness. Yep, the locust army, destroying the land of Israel. Yea, and nothing shall escape them. The appearance of them is as the appearance of horses, and like horsemen, so shall they run. Again, this goes back to the 6th trumpet of Revelation 9. They are a supernatural army. How do we know this? Like the noises of chariots on the top of mountains shall they leap, like the noise of a flame of fire that devoureth the stubble, as a strong people set in battle array. Strong men, mighty men, Gibborim. Before their faces the people shall be much pained, all faces shall gather blackness. They shall run like mighty men. They shall climb the wall like men of war. They shall march everyone in his ways. They shall not break ranks. Neither shall one of them thrust another. They shall walk everyone in his own path. And when they fall upon the sword, they shall not be wounded. So, yes, to answer the question, the return of the giants or the Nephilim, absolutely. We are told specifically in the book of Isaiah regarding the burden of Babylon, that is the army that the Lord puts in their heart to purpose to destroy the city, which again is tied to Revelation 17, the 10 kings giving their power to the beast for 1 hour to accomplish this purpose. They put it in their hearts to do this because they hate her and they burn her with fire. Yep, and who does that? What army is this? The army of mighty men, the giants. And we see that in Joel 1, it's the locust army. They had a king over them, the king of the bottomless pit, whose name is Abaddon. In the Greek, hath Apollyon. Revelation 9:11 tells us that. The angel of the bottomless pit. So you go to Joel 2, and who is this army that's also laying waste to the city of Jerusalem? The giants, the Nephilim, the mighty men. And you know they're supernatural because again, you go to Revelation 5 and 6 and you see that. Joel 1 sets the scenario up for that. And you're clearly told that they can't be hurt, which makes them spiritual entities, not just mere flesh and blood. So yeah, they are absolutely, without doubt, going to play a part. So you go back to the days of Noah, and the inference is that everything that was going on prior to the actual judgment on the earth will be going on again. And yes, that absolutely includes giants. And that absolutely talks about the second coming, the lead up to the second coming, because you overlay that with Babylon and what's going on in the city of Babylon, you see exactly how that could be happening all the way up to the end, because it specifically says that up until Babylon's destroyed, those things essentially will be going on. Once Babylon's destroyed, all of those sounds of merriment and business as usual and business and all of that stuff will cease. Well, when's Babylon destroyed? Literally, last course of business before the second coming. They destroy Babylon, and then they go meet Jesus at Armageddon. You see that in the book of or Isaiah 13 specifically, because it basically like segues right in from the destruction of Babylon right into the second coming. It's like literally the end of Revelation 18 and then the first few verses of Revelation 19, and then Jesus is coming back like immediately after that. So yes, all of this is very, very linked. And yes, it's all the return of the giants and the Nephilim. Absolutely. So you go back to Genesis 4. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were men of old, men of renown. Joel 2, Isaiah 13, you see the same term used, mighty men. God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he made men on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. The Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping thing and the fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations, and Noah walked with God. Noah begat 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. The earth also was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. So God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. God said unto Noah, the end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make thee an ark of gopher wood, rooms shalt thou make in the ark, and shalt pitch it within and without with pitch. And this is the fashion which thou shalt make it of. Then he goes on to talk about the dimensions. Verse 17, and behold, even I do bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, wherein is the breath of life from under heaven, and everything that is in the earth shall die. But with thee I will establish my covenant, and thou shalt come into the ark, thou and thy sons, and thy wife, and thy sons' wives with thee, and every living thing of all flesh, 2 of every sort shalt thou bring into the ark, to keep them alive with thee. They shall be male and female, of fowls after their kind, and of cattle after their kind, and every creeping thing of the earth shall his kind, after his kind, 2 of every sort shall come unto thee, to keep them alive. And take thou unto thee of all food that is eaten, and thou shalt gather it to thee, and it shall be for food for thee and for them. Thus Noah did according to all that God commanded him, so did he. And then in chapter 7, I'll read that too. The Lord said unto Noah, come thou and all thy house into the ark, for thee have I seen righteous before me in this generation. Of every clean beast thou shalt take thee by 7s, the male and his female, and of beasts that are not clean by 2, the male and female. Of fowls of the air by 7s, the male and female, to keep seed alive upon the face of all the earth. For yet 7 days I will cause it to rain upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights, and every living substance that I have made will I destroy from off the face of the earth. And Noah did according unto all the Lord commanded him. Noah was 600 years old when the flood of waters was upon the earth. Noah went in, and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with them into the ark because of the waters of the flood. Of clean beasts and of beasts that are not clean, of the fowls and of everything that creepeth upon the earth, there went in two and two unto Noah into the ark, the male and the female, as God had commanded Noah. It came to pass after 7 days that the water of the floods were upon the earth. So yes, Noah and all of the animals and all of the people, family, animal, people, everything, were in the ark for 7 days before God shut the door. They went in unto Noah in the ark, two and two of all flesh, wherein is the breath of life. And they went in male and female of all flesh, as God had commanded him, and the Lord shut him in. And then God shut the door. The people knew the ark was 100 years in building. Noah was 500 when he started, and he was 600 when the floods came upon the earth. So the door was open for 7 days before God shut them in, and immediately the rains came and killed everyone. It wasn't for lack of head knowledge that they didn't go in. It was for it was willful ignorance. They didn't believe, they didn't care, call it what you will. But it wasn't for lack of head knowledge. Just like at the second coming, it won't be for lack of head knowledge that people don't accept Jesus or that they don't prepare for the second coming. They will know absolutely beyond a shadow of a doubt when Jesus is coming back. And they will choose to gather to do battle with him rather than accept him and be saved. People would rather risk a judgment because they don't want to be held accountable. For this, they are willingly ignorant. That means you know and you choose to disregard. As in the days of Noah. The days of Noah, they knew and they chose to disregard. In the 70th week, they will have every opportunity to be saved during those 7 years, just like people could have gotten on the ark in those 7 days after Noah and his family were on there when the door was open. They could have, and they chose not to. And then 7 days later, God shut them in and the rains came. 7 years later, Jesus is coming back. And at that point, there will be no more opportunity. God closes that door. So the whole thing with the days of Noah hasn't got anything to do with the rapture. It has to do with the second coming and the end of everything, and how things will return to a state of how the earth was at that point. For this year, willingly ignorant that the world standing in the water and out of the water perished. But God promised that he wouldn't destroy the world with water again. He's going to destroy it with fire. They're still going to be destroyed. So there is a lot of reference to kind of understand how the days of Noah will apply, but clearly it's talking about the second coming of Jesus in the days of the coming of the Son of Man. That's a reference to Jesus' second coming. I don't know that I really need to read anything else in Genesis, but the whole story is in Genesis 6, 7, and 8, and 9, specifically. Let me see if I missed anything else that I wanted to discuss regarding that. Just want to make sure I answered all of the questions. Oh, Enoch. Okay, so similitudes, types and shadows. I love the word similitude. Where does it come from? Hosea 10:12. Nope. 12:10. Yep. I have also spoken by the prophets, and I have multiplied visions and used similitudes by the ministry of the prophets. I love that word, similitude. It means types and shadows, but it's just a fun word. I have no idea why I remembered where it was off the top of my head. But yeah, God speaks in types and shadows, obviously. So if Noah, the days of Noah, the story of Noah doesn't have anything to do with the rapture of the church. It's 70th week specific and related to Israel and salvation at the second coming and Babylon and all of the stuff that will be going on when Jesus comes back at the second coming. Well, then what relates to the rapture? Because clearly we're not going to be around for that. Well, no, we're not, because Enoch is the representation of the pre-trib rapture. Genesis 5:21. And Enoch lived 60 and 5 years and begat Methuselah. Enoch walked with God after he begat Methuselah 300 years and begat sons and daughters. All the days of Enoch were 365 years. Enoch walked with God and was not, for God took him. Yep. The fun part about this is Enoch was taken before Noah even existed. Enoch was raptured. When you go to Hebrews 11, it talks about this. Enoch, Hebrews 11:5. By faith, Enoch was translated that he should not see death. Was not found because God had translated him. For before his translation, he had testimony that he pleased God. But without faith, it is impossible to please him. For he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. Then it talks about by faith Noah, etc. The interesting thing about Enoch and Noah. So Enoch was what? Noah's grandfather, great-grandfather. Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, Noah. So great-grandfather, like 3-4 generations, something like that. Enoch was raptured 669 years before Noah was born. So let's talk types and shadows, right? Well, how old was Noah when the floodwaters came upon the earth? Noah was 600 years old when the flood of waters was upon the earth. So you're talking about Noah as a type and shadow of Israel being saved and coming out the other side to repopulate the millennial kingdom. Well, because that's what the command to Noah and his family is after the flood, right? Genesis 9:1. And God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. Okay. So those who go into the millennial kingdom in their natural bodies are going to be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. So that's also a type and shadow. So that's Israel going to repopulate them, going to populate essentially the millennial kingdom after the 70th week. Going to go through the judgment and come out the other side of the judgment to go into the kingdom and repopulate it. Another type and shadow. Okay. So Enoch, who is a representative of is a type and shadow of the pre-trib rapture. Noah is a type and shadow of Israel to go through the 70th week, come out the other side, and repopulate the kingdom. Noah was 600 when the floodwaters came upon the earth. Enoch was removed from the earth 669 years before the flood, which means that he was removed 69 years before Noah was even born. What type and shadow do you suppose the being absent from the 69 being removed 69 years before Noah was born, and then being absent through the whole time of that flood and judgment? What do you suppose all of that represents? Maybe how Enoch is a type and shadow of the pre-trib rapture, the righteous church, who had not one thing to do with the first 69 weeks of years, and who will also not have anything to do with the 70th week of years. perhaps that number specifically, the 669, is, to me, one of the most profound types and shadows, or parts of that whole type and shadow. Because not only was Enoch absent from the whole flood altogether, which the 7 days in the ark before God shut the door and judgment came is overlaid with the 7 years that people have to get in the ark before judgment comes, and again, Jesus or God shuts the door on that. So you have essentially bypassing the 70th week altogether, yep, and that 7 years of judgment, yep. But you also have Enoch removed 69 years before Noah was even born, Noah who would go through that. That 69 is a representation that Enoch, or the righteous church, who actually didn't even exist, had nothing to do with the 69 weeks of years either. Literally has nothing to do with the whole of the 70 weeks prophecy. The church didn't exist before the 69 weeks of years were accomplished. No part of that applied to them whatsoever. And no part of the 70th week will apply to them either. So essentially what you have being shown with that 669 year picture is that the righteous in Christ are completely absented from anything to do with Daniel's 70 weeks prophecy. Basically what that's telling you. Dorothy Fan. How can they be willfully ignorant of the return of the Messiah? Same way anybody can be willfully ignorant of it now. I mean, choice, free will choice. Yes, Revelation mentions about frogs, file 6, the spirits like frogs out of the mouth of the false prophet and the beast and the dragon. Together the kings of the earth to the battle of the great day of God Almighty. Yep. Was Noah a Jew? He was from the lineage that the Jews would come from. I mean, Abraham was the father of the Jewish nation, and he doesn't come till Genesis 12. So, I mean, I don't know if you could call him, he was a Hebrew. He's a Hebrew. I mean, yes. Okay. So hopefully they answered all of the questions in discussing the days of Noah. If there are any other questions that anyone has, please let me know. But hopefully that covered the bulk of the ones that were out there. And what I'm going to work on next is something like some kind of visual aid to talk about the elders, the 24, and the throne room in Revelation 4, because that conversation originates in the Old Testament, but Hebrews 7, the priesthood being changed, there was also of necessity made a change of the law. So clearly the Old Testament priesthood established by David would have been changed. You're talking about a move from Levi to Judah, the high priest. For it is evident our Lord sprang out of Judah, of which tribe Moses spake nothing concerning priesthood. So you're talking about a transition from the tribe of Levi to the tribe of Judah. And so by necessity, all points of the law and everything that related to the Old Testament priesthood would have changed. What is the change related to the priesthood in the New Testament? And that is what Revelation 4 is talking about. The elders and the 24 and all of that stuff is the representation of what the priesthood in the New Testament is all about. So I think I'm probably going to do a visual aid with that. I don't know how long it will take me, but maybe I'll work on it this weekend. So thank you all for being here. Again, if you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please let me know. But I think that was everything I could think of to talk about with the days of Noah. So have a good night, everybody, and I will see you later.